really creepy in there. Have a good day.
You too. Well, you learn something new every day. Tent caterpillars are really going after the trees here in the ravine. Anyway, Edmonton real estate prices. Anyway, Edmonton real estate market. The oil prices between $40 and $50 a barrel. Edmonton, I just happen to know one particular property, and it was basically a lower middle class rental. And in 2004, it sold for $92,000. And 2006, 2007, when oil prices were $130, $140, it was $228,000. And now it's back to about $95,000. And back then, when it was purchased, it was oil was around $15 a barrel. So obviously, there's expectations or thoughts, or there's a lot of what's it called? Animal spirits in the market back then. But anyway, obviously, people think that the problems in Edmonton. Oh, the demand for real estate, the vacancy rates well over 10% now in a lot of these properties for rentals. So there's obviously less demand for jobs, less projects, etc. So it's funny how in Canada you can see danger markets in Vancouver and Toronto, and then a market like that. So if they said they're going to go after with higher interest rates and strong policies, it's cool off Toronto and Vancouver, they're really going to hurt Edmonton, Calgary. Ironically enough, when because of the royalties, etc., when oil is booming, our federal government does really well with taxes. But now they don't, of course, because things are getting cooler. And obviously the less jobs. Anyway, it's interesting. But back to Toronto, like you're starting to see, not the craziness of Vancouver, because there was some really dodgy neighborhoods there who were literally $1.2 million places. And even though the pictures showed the rot, some of these places, obviously there have been leaks for years and they hadn't been fixed, and you could literally see the stucco peeling away in some really bad house in a bad neighborhood. It's just sad. Toronto, what's interesting is in my neighborhood specifically, we're getting a lot of houses on bigger lots being torn down. They're putting up 2 tall thins, and they're selling them for like $1.5 million each. And they're going up pretty fast. It's something interesting what's going on. Where's this going to lead? I don't know. Obviously, the fear is everyone's going to have fear, because that's how everyone likes to be. Everyone's wired, is that the market's going to suddenly crash. But having been through several cycles now, even in Edmonton, when oil turned and started going down, the market just leveled off for months, and you could actually watch the sales figures. Oops. You could actually watch the sales figures taper off and slow down. I'm getting jumped on by those caterpillars again. And so it's not like you didn't have a pretty good idea what was going on, what was happening. It's funny, several years ago, around 2010, there was a bunch of naysayers I worked with, and actually a friend of mine, one of his best buddies, had actually taken all his money out of the real estate market, was renting, and had put it into gold. And fortunately, he missed the rise in the market, and gold is down from where he purchased it, so it didn't work out too much for him. It's funny, when you're younger and you're just learning about investing and everything, you're always thinking, oh, I know what I can do, I'll just stop loss myself out. But if you take a one-way bet and it doesn't work, and God help you if it does work, but God help you if it doesn't work either. And just the pain and agony you go through trying to fix that problem. One anecdote I always remind myself, back in 2006, 2007, when I was in Vancouver, I was at a barbecue, and someone's cousin was up from Silicon Valley in California, and he'd mentioned the problem he was running into. He worked in Silicon Valley, and had a good job career-wise. And his house was worth $2.7 million. He was 40 minutes from work, and he told me that was with the traffic and rush hour, and Silicon Valley's notoriously bad traffic. And he bought it in 2002, 2003 for $700. Everyone thought he was crazy, but he wanted to live near his office. And he was sitting on $2.7 million. But here was the rub. He couldn't do anything about it. He wanted to still work where he was. Technically, I guess he could have retired and cashed out. But he had a family, young family and kids, and I don't think that was his plan. So he's sitting on $2 million net, assuming he hadn't paid off any of his down payment or his original purchase price. So probably a little bit more. And he couldn't cash out. So it looked great on paper. Now there was a bit of a drop after that, but I'm pretty sure Silicon Valley never really turned down that much because there's still the big demand for jobs. So I think that's where we sit in Toronto right now. We know apparently the population's increasing about 1 or 2% a year with immigration. In my neighborhood specifically, within about a 10-minute walk in either direction, there's about a dozen condo projects going up. 6 stories, 50, 60, 80 units at a time. Nice enough units and everything. But generally 1, maybe 2 bedroom. I wouldn't really call them family oriented. I guess most of the world they would be because they have the kids in the same room. But from a Canadian perspective, generally people like to have 3 bedrooms if they have 2 kids. And so there is building going on, and so what I'm planning on doing is basically watching the condo market because it seems to be the first one that goes soft. And there was a period last year when it did, but not so much anymore. We have I haven't checked in on this, but I can't imagine it's changed. There was a policy that the banks weren't allowed to break ground unless they were 75% pre-sold. That's if the banks were involved in the financing. Obviously private money, but none of them seem to go that route, or very few of them. So it had to be 75% sold before they could break ground. I may be off on that 75% of it, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. So essentially the risk is off the developer because he'll take a small loss. Because any of the paperwork I've ever seen in these developments, they seem to only make about 10 to 15% on average on these developments, although some have done better. Which makes me think what a scary industry that is, because a 10% drop in real estate prices when you're breaking ground, etc., and suddenly you're opening up a project at a loss, but that's neither here nor there. Hi. Funny, this woman just jogged by. She's wearing a kerchief over her mouth. I guess she didn't want to, when she was jogging, swallow a caterpillar. Because to be honest, they are friggin' everywhere. New topic. Anyway, there's 3 areas to put your money I'd like to talk about. One is debt instruments, one is equities, and one is precious metals and all that type of thing, which is more of a preservation. Oh, sorry, the third was real estate. So start over again. Just got a bug on my neck. So you got debt, so you buy CDs, bonds, etc. You buy equities, which is a business or stocks, and you buy real estate. So let's look at where money's going to go right now. Real estate is rising. Debt equity is basically 0% interest. Hello.
Hi.
Just wants to play. Yeah.
You're full of energy. She doesn't have that much energy. Aw. Look at the posts, aren't they?
Yeah, I was just talking to a woman who... Start over again. So 3 places there are to put your money. are real estate, debt instruments, GICs, bonds, etc., and equity, like the stock market, maybe buying a piece of a business. So basically interest rates are horrendously low. Last time I looked, 10-year US was around 2.5%. In fact, it might be lower than that. Japan's at 0 basically. Europe's not much better than that. Equities are just slowly moving up. Doesn't seem to be real value. Markets seems to get scoured pretty rapidly for any value at all. So if there's anything priced, as you don't get 10-year rises, it seems to happen all at once.
Did it run away? It's pretty slow, right? They're not that fast.
And that leaves us real estate. Population's still growing in the cities. People are still moving there, and the population of Canada is still growing. So the price of real estate rises. And as long as it doesn't get ahead of itself, which may or may not be happening right now, then that's the place to put your money. What's funny is we have other pressures in Toronto and Vancouver, and that is outside money from other places. And a lot of them are just diversifying out of their currencies, I understand. A lot of them in Vancouver who are basically buying a passport, in a lot of cases shipping their families over. And then they had what's called, the Hong Kong families had what's called satellite dads. So the dads would stay back in Hong Kong and continue to work on their business while their family was in Canada. And that's partially due to university opportunities. Very difficult because they don't have enough universities in that part of the world. That the standards to get in are very high, and so to get into quote a good school, it's almost impossible. So it's a little easier to get into good school in North America, especially if you're wanting to write a check and of course get good marks. So my basically opinion is, overall, I can't see interest rates rising in the short term because there's just too much money in the system right now. There's too many pension funds trying to search for yield. They're going to continue to buy these 10-year. There's too much exports going to China. So the Chinese, in order to balance out their currency, buy US bonds and hold them. And that way they can keep their currency low, or at least steady. Japanese are doing the same thing. Equities, hard to see any real value, probably fair value. That's about it. So there's not real opportunities there, and so money is drifting into real estate. People, the more the prices rise, the more people hang on rather than sell, which pulls supply off the market, which could be the ultimate weakness in the market.